My name is Madison Taylor. I served 8 years in the U.S. Army, 2 tours overseas, and more months in the desert than I care to count. I've disarmed bombs, jumped out of helicopters, and talked men through panic with bullets flying around us. But nothing prepared me for the quiet way my mother said my name when I walked through her front door. She hugged me too fast, like someone checking off a box. Her arms were thinner than I remembered. Her smile was all muscle memory. When she let go, I caught a glimpse of a faint yellow bruise blooming across the edge of her collarbone. I didn't say anything. Soldiers are trained to assess first. Her sweater sleeves were rolled down, even though the air conditioner was out of order. Her eyes flinched every time the floor creaked, and she moved around the kitchen like someone memorizing safe paths. The house was clean, too clean. Everything smelled like lemon, the counters, the floors, the door handles. The place felt like it was trying too hard to be normal. We sat at the table that night, eating reheated lasagna. She asked me about my last assignment like she was reading from a script. I asked about Dad, and she said he was away on a business trip. Her hand twitched slightly when she reached for her glass. I've spent most of my life reading silence. I know the weight of it. The silence in that house was loud. It pulsed through the walls, the floors, even the silverware drawer. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan clicked in an uneven rhythm. I stared up at it and thought about the time Dad broke the remote when I was 7, then made me stand and watch while he told Mom why it was my fault. That memory hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't thought about that day in years. But now, being home, everything came back fast. The way my mom used to hold her breath when the garage door opened, the way I used to pretend I was asleep just so I wouldn't have to talk. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of the house, not out of habit, but because something felt wrong. There was a new security camera over the garage, pointing at the side gate. The front lock had fresh scratches, as if it had been replaced recently. I crouched down by the baseboard in the living room and noticed a dent the shape of a heel. I wasn't in uniform anymore, but my training never left me. Something had happened here, and my mom was acting like it hadn't. To the outside world, my father was a pillar of the community. He owned 2 businesses, donated to the local hospital, and showed up to every charity gala in a custom-tailored suit. People called him a gentleman. They smiled when he shook their hands and thanked him when he picked up the tab at the country club. But behind our front door, none of that mattered. At home, he didn't speak, he issued instructions. My mother was expected to answer before he finished his sentence. Dinner had to be served at 6:30 sharp. The lights in the hallway stayed dim after 9, and I wasn't allowed to leave my room without knocking first. He never raised his voice, but that didn't make him any less terrifying. His control came through the silence, the long stares, the calculated corrections. One time, when I was 10, I used the wrong fork at dinner. He didn't say a word. He just got up, walked behind me, and took the plate away without breaking eye contact. I didn't eat for the rest of the night. My mother learned to navigate him like she was walking a minefield. She moved with a careful grace, like everything she did was part of some unseen negotiation. She stopped wearing colors he didn't like. She let him choose the family photos that stayed on the wall. She rearranged the pantry twice a month, just to keep things in order. To most people, he was charming, the kind of man who opened car doors and remembered your birthday. But charm is just control with a better outfit. At school, my friends would say how lucky I was to have a father who cared about image and success. I didn't correct them. I just smiled, nodded, and kept my stories to myself. There were no bruises when I was young, just rules. He didn't need to hit us. His power was in what he took away. The sound of laughter, the space to breathe, the chance to be wrong without punishment. He was obsessed with how things looked, not how they felt. Our living room was spotless. Our clothes were always pressed. But I never saw my mother read a book or play music in that house. Every part of our life felt staged, like we were extras in a show where he played the lead. When people came over, he switched it on, the warm voice, the practice stories. He'd touch my mother's shoulder gently, like he loved her. Then she'd look at me with that frozen smile, the one I learned to mimic when I needed to lie without speaking. I remember once, in high school, I got an award for writing an essay about resilience. He came to the ceremony, shook hands with the principal, and told the audience how proud he was. On the ride home, he asked why I hadn't mentioned him in the speech. I spent the rest of that night cleaning the garage in silence. I grew up thinking control meant love, that silence was safety, that if something felt off, the answer was to adjust myself, not question him. My mother taught me how to survive, not how to live. Looking back now, I realize he built a house of mirrors. One version for the world, one for us, and none of them showed the truth. After I left the army, I didn't want a desk job or a quiet life. I wanted structure, purpose, so I joined the police department. The uniform felt familiar, the chain of command comforting, but this time, the enemy wasn't overseas. It was closer, much closer. I started in patrol, then moved into fraud and financial crimes. I liked numbers. They didn't lie. People did. But money left a trail. And that trail eventually led me back to my father. It began small. I saw his name pop up in a local business license renewal, nothing suspicious. Just a note in the system. But something about the address didn't sit right. It wasn't his main company. It was a shell, a paper operation registered under a woman's name I didn't recognize. I ran a quiet search. No red flags, but my gut kept tugging. I waited a week, ran it again. Then I pulled bank activity linked to that LLC. What I found didn't add up. There were transfers from charitable accounts into private holdings. Large sums labeled as consulting fees are going to a lifestyle influencer based in Tampa. Her social media was a curated blur of beaches, designer bags, and motivational quotes. I recognized the yacht in the background. It used to belong to one of Dad's investors. From the outside, everything looked legal. Technically. But the timing was off. The amounts were too consistent, too polished. It smelled like laundering. My pulse slowed. This wasn't just family anymore. It was criminal. I didn't tell anyone. Not my supervisors. Not my partner on the force. This was personal. I built a separate folder, encrypted and off the books. Every spare moment, I dug deeper. Every quiet night, I pulled tax records, spoke to city clerks, and traced documents through counties no one ever checked. The deeper I went, the wider it got. There were 5 shell companies, not one, each tied to different causes: veterans, food banks, women's shelters, all funneling money in circles that landed back with Dad, or that influencer who turned out to be his mistress. She was younger than me by 5 years. Her entire brand was based on healing after toxic relationships. I watched one of her live streams where she told women to walk away from men who don't honor your worth. Meanwhile, she was cashing checks from mine. I started keeping a burner phone, documenting everything: screenshots, dates, names. I created a timeline with every transaction and linked it to real events donations he bragged about, photo ops with local officials, press articles quoting him as a model citizen. It made me sick, but I stayed quiet. I needed to be exact. This wasn't war, but it felt like one. I couldn't just strike. I had to build the case, inch by inch, like laying explosives under a bridge I planned to burn clean. At night, I stared at old photos of my parents. Her smile always looked real. He didn't. And now, behind every spreadsheet, behind every fake signature, was the same man I once tried so hard to please. He built a kingdom on lies, and I was learning how to dismantle it. Not with a weapon, but with evidence, patience, and the kind of discipline he never saw coming. It was a Tuesday morning when I asked her to sit with me. She was folding towels on the couch, pretending not to notice the edge in my voice. I told her we needed to talk, and she paused, hands tightening on the fabric like she already knew what was coming. She didn't look up when I said I knew about the bruises. She just kept folding. I waited. The silence stretched between us like a rope pulled too tight. Finally, she said, "It's not what you think." Her voice was soft, trained, Practiced. I sat across from her and placed a folder on the coffee table. No sudden moves, just steady hands. I told her I wasn't asking. I was showing. I opened the folder and slid out a photo, a wire transfer from a charity fund to an account in the Caymans. Then another, a picture of Dad on a yacht with the influencer, her arm looped through his. Her eyes flinched, but she didn't speak. I kept going. A notarized business registry in her name. A forged signature. A scanned check. She never wrote. I said nothing for a while. I just let the paper do the talking. She finally whispered, "He said I wouldn't understand." I nodded. He was counting on that. She stared at the table for a long time. Her fingers hovered above one document, then pulled back. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would pass. She said that if I didn't challenge him, he'd stay calm. That if I just kept it all together, it wouldn't get worse. I told her I used to believe that too. Back when I thought discipline was the same thing as love. When silence felt safer than truth. Her shoulders dropped. Like she'd been carrying a weight so long, she forgot what it felt like to set it down. Then she said it. Soft, almost broken. "He hits me." She looked up, finally meeting my eyes. Not always, but enough. The room didn't spin. It didn't explode. It just stopped. Like everything froze for a second and realigned. I reached out and took her hand. She didn't pull away. Her skin felt cold. Fragile. I told her there were things we could do. Legal steps. Protection. Options. She shook her head, but not with resistance. With fear. The kind that lives in your bones. "I don't want to make things worse," she said. I looked at her and said, "He already did." She didn't cry, but something in her cracked. I could feel it. And when I handed her the form for a protection order, she didn't push it away. She read every line, slowly. Her hand trembled when she signed it, but she signed it. That was the moment. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet courage. In the middle of an ordinary day. She finally said it, and I finally heard her. The moment I handed over the folder, I knew there was no going back. My supervisor didn't ask questions. He just flipped through the evidence, page by page, until the color drained from his face. He looked at me and said, "You sure you're ready for this?" I nodded. I'd been ready for years. The first knock came at dawn. Federal agents, warrant in hand. They moved through my father's office with quiet precision, opening drawers, photographing ledgers, boxing up hard drives. He stood there in a robe, confused, trying to talk his way out like it was just another negotiation. This time, no one was listening. By noon, every local news station had the story. Respected businessman, tied to charity fraud, domestic abuse allegations surface. His face was everywhere, on headlines, on phone screens, across the ticker of a breaking news banner. The same face that used to make my stomach tighten now looked small, exposed. But what he didn't expect was her. The influencer. His mistress. She flipped. Gave them passwords, emails, and voice notes. Said she was manipulated too. Maybe she was. Maybe she wasn't. I didn't care. What mattered was the data she gave them, which buried him deeper than I ever could. They raided his rental properties next. Found documents he wasn't supposed to have. Tax filings with conflicting dates. Photos of my mother's ID used to open accounts she never touched. When they showed her, she didn't flinch. She just stared at the paper for a long while, then folded it neatly and placed it on the table like trash. He was arrested 2 days later. The cuffs clicked around his wrists just as the cameras rolled. For the first time, he didn't have words. No spin. No script. Just a face frozen in disbelief as he was led to the car. We watched it from the living room. My mother sat on the edge of the couch, hands folded, back straight. The same couch where she once cried in silence. The same couch where she pretended everything was fine. When they played the clip again, and the anchor started speculating about his sentence, she looked at the screen without blinking. Then, without turning to me, she whispered, "Burn it all." It wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was a release. I knew what she meant. Not just the businesses, the fake charities, the lies. All of it. The silence. The fear. The version of her that he built piece by piece. She didn't want revenge. She wanted freedom. That night, I shredded the last folder of backup documents. We wouldn't need them anymore. The case was airtight. He was done. And for the first time in my life, I felt the war inside our house was over. Not one with weapons or rage, but with truth, persistence, and two women who finally stopped flinching. We moved in the middle of spring, just 2 hours outside the city, to a town where no one knew our name. The house was small, one story, with a porch that creaked when you stepped on it, and a backyard big enough to start over. The first thing I did was buy tomato seeds. It's funny what sticks with you. When I was 8, I told my mom I wanted a garden. She smiled and said maybe one day. That day had finally come. We spent the afternoon digging in the dirt. Our hands are dirty, knees pressed into the grass, sun warming the back of our necks. It felt good. Simple. Honest. No pretending. Just soil, water, and time. She laughed when she realized she had planted the rows too close together. I teased her about it, and she gave me a look I hadn't seen in years. One with no fear behind it. Just a little surprise and a lot of light. We didn't talk about the past much. It hung in the air sometimes, quiet but present, like a shadow at the edge of the yard. But we didn't need to speak it anymore. We had both survived it. At night, we sat on the porch and listened to crickets. She drank tea. I drank water. We'd watch the stars come out one by one. No sirens. No cameras. No bruises to hide. Just stillness. One morning, I walked outside and saw her crouched beside the garden. She was humming. Her hands were in the dirt, pulling weeds with a kind of peace I'd never seen on her face. I stood there for a minute, not saying anything, just watching. That was when it hit me. Some battles don't end with victory. They end with a space. Space to breathe, to laugh, to plant something that grows without fear of being cut down. I used to think strength looked like weapons and commands and silence. Now I know it also looks like two women in a tomato garden, covered in dirt and smiling without asking permission. The plants are growing faster than we expected. Some are crooked. A few lean too far toward the sundae, but they're alive, and so are we.